Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to have, we're going to have a few people talk and have a video in a moment. And if you can be quiet, there are people in Germany watching this on Zoom and elsewhere in the country. So to the extent that we can, not pick up too much background sound. I'm Terry Odean. I met Shirley in 1971 in Germany. After she moved to Canada, we didn't see each other very often, but we kept in touch. In 1979, Shirley and Buford moved to Berkeley, California. I was living in San Francisco, and Shirley invited me over to their new apartment for pizza. That night I met Buford. We laughed and joked and told stories for hours. I felt as if we'd known each other for years. Some months later, Buford and Shirley and I rented a house in San Francisco, about a mile from the beach. And that's when I came to appreciate just how serious of a musician Buford was. Buford would spend hours practicing every day, and he never missed a day. More than once, Buford told me that he was determined to earn his living for the rest of his life as a musician, no matter how difficult that was. He was not going to take a day job. He was going to stick to music, which he did, and it was sometimes an uphill battle. Michael Buford Robey was born in Midland, Texas on October 7th, 1951. His parents, Buford Irwin Robey and Vera Ritchie, were young and irresponsible. When Buford was 3 years old, he and his younger sister Susie were taken away from their parents by the courts. Buford had the good fortune to be put in the care of his grandmother, Odie Mae Robey, and her husband Clarence, who lived on a farm near Linden, in East Texas. Odie Mae was part Choctaw Indian, and during the Depression, Odie Mae had moved from Oklahoma to Texas in a covered wagon with chickens in the back. Odie Mae taught Buford about his sense of teasing, his sense of humor, and many times Buford would talk, when he would talk about Odie Mae, you could just see that she was one of the people that he loved most in his life. His parents divorced but continued to see each other, and 2 years later, Buford's parents secretly had another child, Sharon, who was given up for adoption. And Buford didn't know he had another sister until 50 years later, when Sharon found her biological family. Buford lived with Odie Mae from age 3 to 9. She treated him as a son, and they had a deep bond. His dad, who was in the Army, visited occasionally and bullied his son. When his father remarried, Buford and Susie went to live with their dad and stepmother Jan. The family was poor, the kids were often hungry, and the parents were often drunk. Buford's parents fought violently, and Buford's father beat him regularly for no reason or any reason. Though abusive, Buford's dad was a music fan. He gave Buford a lap steel guitar when Buford was 6 years old, and he introduced Buford to Ray Charles, Hank Williams, Bob Wills, Frank Sinatra, Lefty Frizzell, and Patsy Cline. Chet Atkins was an early influence. Buford learned to play the guitar. He loved music and spent hours playing every day. Music was his refuge. As a teenager, Buford learned every lick that Mike Bloomfield from the Paul Butterfield Blues Band played. Mike Bloomfield was his absolute hero. He also loved Jimi Hendrix, Frank Zappa. Later, when Buford discovered jazz, he studied by listening to all the great jazz guitarists: Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass, Jim Hall, Lenny Bereau, John McLaughlin, and foremost, Pat Metheny. When Buford was 15, the family moved to Calgary, Canada. Buford left home in 1969 at the age of 17 to escape his father's violence and alcoholism. He moved to Winnipeg, Manitoba, where he married his first wife, Sherry. He drove a cab, he played in rock and roll bands, he played in blues bands, he played guitar, and he sang the lead. He even played Bob Dylan songs on acoustic guitar. He spent many hours listening to jazz guitarist Lenny Breau Borough, I knew I got that wrong, who was performing in Winnipeg at the time. Buford's marriage to Sherry did not last long, and in 1974, Buford moved to Vancouver. He enrolled in music theory courses at Vancouver Community College, where in 1977, he met Shirley, who was studying classical flute. Buford bought Shirley a bass and bass lessons so that she could play a more practical, useful instrument. He even talked to me about this. He didn't really need a flute in his band, but a bass player was always very helpful. In 1979, Buford and Shirley were married and moved to Berkeley. They played together as a duo. When they moved to Portland in 1981, they played as a four-piece country band with Doug Adair. Buford and Shirley spent many years looking for the right place to settle down. They lived in the Bay Area, Portland, Sacramento. They spent 3 years just on the road. No home, just driving up and down the coast. You played in Alaska for quite a while too, right? Yeah. In 1969, they bought a house in Reno. There were music jobs in the casinos, and they had many friends who they'd met in those years on the road. So Reno seemed like a good home. They continued to play as a duo. In 2004, they put together a band called Retroactive with Tom DeFalco and Tom Davis. This band morphed over the years, and they got to play with many talented musicians, some of whom are here today. The music business changed, though, and keeping the band together became too much. To make ends meet, Shirley took a daytime office job, and Buford started teaching guitar. Much to his surprise, he actually liked teaching guitar. He really enjoyed it, and some of his longtime students continued to take lessons from him right up until a couple of months before his death. In 2017, Buford and Shirley met Dominic. Dominic was here a moment ago. Met Dominic Unzio, thank you. And joined the group, Dom and Friends, and you just heard Dom and Friends, playing ukulele-based music, and Shirley continues to play with Dom. During the last decade of his life, Buford's drinking increased, followed by and mixed with dementia. He wasn't feeling well, and when doctors found his cancer, it had already spread to his lungs. Buford died at home in the care of hospice on November 26, 2024. Despite many challenges, Buford achieved his goal of earning a living as a musician for all of his life. As most of you know, Buford was a very loyal and enduring friend. He maintained friendships with many of us here today and others joining on Zoom for decades. Buford was one of my closest friends. We talked on the phone regularly, and he would always recommend a book. He said, "You got to read this book," or he would tell me enthusiastically about a long, long bike ride he had just taken. Buford and Shirley would come down a few times a year and visit Martha and me and our daughters in Berkeley. Our girls loved Buford, and though he played the role of a curmudgeon, he loved them. He teased them, but more gently than he teased adults, and they teased him back. When Buford and Shirley came to town, we would eat pizza, laugh, joke, and tell stories, just like we did the night that I met Buford 45 years ago. I'm going to miss those nights, and I'm going to miss Buford. Thank you.